You are on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of May 16, 2025. A huge number of events have occurred today, so let's get started, and we'll begin with the Kaminskoa section of the front. Today there are several geolocated videos from the area of the settlement of Kaminskoa, showing how Ukrainian FPV drone operators are striking Russian units that have gradually begun to advance near the main strongpoints of the Ukrainian armed forces. Based on this footage, we can mark a small change on the map for this section of the front, just north of the settlement of Lobkovoye. This might simply be a cartographic adjustment, but it's also possible that Russian units have begun a gradual advance with the goal of tightening the noose around Ukrainian forces in the southern and eastern parts of Kaminskoa. However, this is the only more or less significant report from that area worth noting. Next, we move on to the South Donetsk direction. Here, the main events are unfolding between the villages of Novopol, Zelenoye Pole, and Volnoye Pole. Today, or more precisely yesterday, Russian sources published this footage, and in this video we can see Russian soldiers raising Russian flags in different parts of the village of Volnoye Pole. Based on this footage, and also based on the report and briefing from the Russian Ministry of Defense, an update was made to the map. Today, we are marking the entire settlement of Volnoye Pole as being under the control of the Russian army. Apparently, Russian forces are continuing their advance with the goal of semi-encircling Shevchenko and flanking to strike from the south. Further advancement is also possible along a broader front toward the settlement of Zelenoye Pole from the north and northeast. But for now, we stop at Volnoye Pole. Only this map update is being made today. Next, we move on to the settlement of Bogatir, where fighting is ongoing. Despite the updates made by most mapmakers, both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian, as well as some neutral ones, we can see that in reality, intense fighting is still taking place here. Apparently, pro-Ukrainian mapmakers are in no rush this time to update the map. According to them, Russian units currently control only the southeastern part. Moreover, Russian troops have not yet managed to take control of the strongpoint located in the southernmost part of the settlement. So despite all the statements and various publications we've seen over the past few days, it appears that high-intensity combat is still ongoing for this settlement. Some sources report that the Ukrainian side is holding on to Bogatir for one reason only, to retain it as long as possible during negotiations. But those negotiations appear to have concluded today. Thus, there is a very high probability that in the coming days, the Ukrainian side will abandon Bogatir and retreat to more defensible positions. At the same time, there is information that certain Russian units, most likely reconnaissance and sabotage groups, have managed to enter the southern outskirts of Otradnoye. So in the near future, we might also expect a map adjustment in this area. If Otradnoye falls before Bogatir, the only option left for the Ukrainian side will be to withdraw across the Volchya River to the north and northwest, toward the next settlement of Zeleny Kut, as well as toward Alexeyevka, where the situation is also shaping up unfavorably for the Ukrainian forces. There are ongoing assaults and offensives here as well, primarily on the eastern outskirts. Next, we move on to the Pavlovka section of the front. There are updates to the map. Over the past 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources have published a number of videos showing Russian convoys moving toward Novosergeyevka and Novonikolayevka. In these videos, we can see a series of strikes by FPV drone operators of the Ukrainian armed forces, resulting in several Russian army vehicles being damaged or even destroyed in this area of the front. There is also an extended video, about a minute and a half long, containing a large number of clips, two of which were geolocated. One was located in the fields along a tree line and barbed wire, and one vehicle was hit almost right on the approaches to the settlement of Novosergeyevka at this exact point. Based on this objective control footage, we have updated the map to reflect the transition of what was previously a grey zone. Let me remind you that until yesterday, most cartographers considered these territories as contested or grey zones. But starting from today, we mark them as under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, as there is no longer any doubt that these areas have come under Russian control. At the moment, the Russian army continues its offensive toward Novosergeyevka and Novonikolayevka. How the situation develops, but overall, the situation is difficult for Ukrainian units, as the Russian army keeps advancing. Next, we move to the area around the town of Pokrovsk, from which we are receiving a large amount of geolocation footage. Speaking of specific objective control videos, Russian forces continue to carry out airstrikes and rocket artillery strikes on the southern part of Pokrovsk. This is the high-rise residential area where Ukrainian forces have established strong fortifications. There is an ongoing effort to essentially wipe out this neighborhood, as its presence significantly hinders further Russian advances into the city of Pokrovsk. Nevertheless, according to some pro-Russian cartographers, Russian forces continue to expand their control, particularly in the southwestern part, aiming to reach the western outskirts of the town. Take note, some pro-Russian cartographers today made additional map updates, claiming that Russian forces managed to fully clear the settlement of Zverevo in the past 24 hours. These territories, roughly outlined by this red line, are now considered fully controlled by the Russian armed forces, a significant advance if this information proves accurate. This adjustment to the front line indicates that combat operations are already shifting toward the city of Pokrovsk itself, or more likely, not yet the city proper, but the central area of the greater Pokrovsk agglomeration. We can see that the villages of Leontovichi and Troyadna lie ahead of the Russian forces, and after that begins the city of Pokrovsk. Given the short distances between these settlements, it's clear that combat operations for control over Pokrovsk are now underway, especially on the southwestern approach. Here, the apparent objective for Russian units is to reach the railroad junction near the M30 highway, taking a short radius approach rather than a wide flanking maneuver. This suggests a shift in offensive tactics. Instead of advancing toward Udakne and further into Sergeyevka to try and encircle Pokrovsk on a broader front, the Russian military seems to have opted for a narrower, more direct push into the suburban area. The objectives remain the same, but the method may require fewer resources. On the eastern flank, the offensive continues for the third day in a row. Both Ukrainian and Russian sources are publishing objective control footage from the area of Mirolyubivka. Today, Russian sources released new videos showing how the battle for the settlement unfolded. These videos include several scenes of Russian soldiers raising the Russian flag in various parts of the settlement. The most important footage shows a Russian soldier waving the flag at the northernmost farm of Mirolyubivka. Based on this footage, the map is further updated to reflect Russian control over the farms near Mirolyubivka. Thus, a pincer movement is slowly closing in from the west and east, gradually bringing Pokrovsk into a semi-encirclement, with the possibility of a full encirclement in the near future. This may well be the main reason why the Ukrainian side is urgently pushing both Western partners and the Russian side for a ceasefire. There is a strong possibility that Pokrovsk is not ready for a prolonged defense. Next, we move to the Banbek sector, from which a large number of geolocation videos have emerged. As we've been discussing in recent days, the Russian army has established full fire control over the pocket using drones. According to incoming reports, Ukrainian forces have begun withdrawing units from the pocket northward toward Oleksandr Kalinov, Banbek, and Yablunivka. There is now considerable movement of Ukrainian units inside the pocket, and this has drawn the attention of a massive number of Russian drones, hundreds, if not thousands, whose main objective is to disrupt the Ukrainian withdrawal. As you can see from the objective control footage, Russian forces appear to be succeeding in this effort. An enormous amount of footage shows Russian drones flying overhead and striking any targets attempting to move north. So far, no major assaults are reported from the southern or eastern sides of the pocket. However, according to some pro-Russian sources, there is uninterrupted Russian progress from the western direction. Russian troops are gradually advancing through the fields toward the northeast. At least, that's what has been reported by various pro-Russian cartographers today. As for the town of Donetsk, as we discussed a few days ago, the situation there appears to have stabilized. Ukrainian activity in the area now seems limited to drone operations targeting Russian positions around the perimeter of the city. There have been no recent Ukrainian attempts at counter-offensives in the Donetsk area, likely due to the fact that Russian troops recently took control of several key strongpoints located outside Pokrovsk, which were previously considered to be in the grey zone but are now under firm Russian control. On the Chasiv Yar axis, for the third day in a row, we are receiving reports that the Russian army has completed the clearance of the central citadel. Today, this information was once again confirmed by several reliable pro-Russian analysts. At the moment, we are maintaining the status of the territory as is and waiting for geolocation confirmation from the Ukrainian armed forces. In any case, if no compromises or agreements are reached between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in the near future, we should expect the resumption of hostilities and the beginning of an assault on the Shevchenko district, the most strategically important neighborhood in the entire Chasiv Yar direction. As for the Civk sector, there are no changes. Russian units continue to advance through the Kremina forest, clearing a path for assault troops using TOS-1A Solntsepiok thermobaric systems. Today we received more footage showing strikes on Ukrainian frontline positions along the Sivskaya Donetsk River. For now, there are no updates to the front line in this area. In the Lyman direction, rather contradictory information is coming in from the settlement of Torsky itself. Let me remind you that yesterday the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that Russian units had managed to establish full control over this settlement during the fighting. Several pieces of footage from objective control sources were also published, confirming this information. However, today neutral pro-Ukrainian and, let's say, Western OSINT analysts, those who gather data from open sources, have cast doubt on whether the entire settlement of Torska has indeed come under Russian control. The majority of Western experts agree that the southern part of Torska, meaning everything south of the Yellow Line, is still under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So for now, we are not updating the map. We are keeping it based on the Russian Ministry of Defense's briefing. But we're also keeping in mind that there may still be pockets of Ukrainian resistance in the area. Again, it's worth noting that the announcement about the clearing of Torske came exactly on the day when negotiations were beginning. It is quite possible that all these statements and updates were released to shape a particular psychological atmosphere around the negotiation process. Moving further north today, if we talk about the Kursk and Sumy regions, there have been no active changes or combat engagements. There are some isolated visuals showing fire strikes on temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine. However, when it comes to actual changes on the map, nothing significant has occurred. While certain pro-Russian Telegram channels regularly post reports of advances by Russian units near the settlements of Loknya, Yablunivka, Belovod and Vodolagi, no objective control footage has been provided to support those claims. Let me also remind you that, according to information obtained today from the course of the negotiations in Istanbul, the Russian side is insisting on the creation of a 50-kilometer security zone along the Sumy region. In doing so, they are demanding that Ukrainian forces withdraw from those territories. We'll keep monitoring how the situation develops, but overall, it seems everything is gradually reaching a stalemate. That's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you. Keep watching.